Ooh, coming back at ya. Out now, brown cow, smooth jazz. Welcome back, everyone. Episode 5 of the Hometown Brawn podcast. For those of you that are joining us, thank you so much and welcome. For those of you that have been around for a couple or since the beginning, wow, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. All right, let's hop into this. Today, we're going to talk about the real, the mental health, if not the most important struggle that we go through on a day-to-day basis as an entrepreneur and business owner. Today, we talk about that with Hayley Peek. Hayley Peek is a peer support consultant and mental health consultant. And her partner, Kim, have come up with this great program that I saw and thought, wow, that is what needs to be talked about with every entrepreneur. And that's called Supporting Through Struggle. And it's a program where we get to address and don't suppress what's going on inside us and our employees and all around us within our internal culture as a business and an organization. Really important that we talk about that. So that's coming up really soon. Because it's a little bit of a longer call, I'm going to make this short, but it is going to be to the point. All right. But first, please subscribe, take a minute, show your support, give us a like, give us a share, tell your friends, engage with us, drop a comment. Really appreciate that. All right. So this is Mental Health Awareness Month. Okay. I think every month should be, and I think it should be of the utmost importance that we talk about it all the time. But unfortunately, because of stigmas or egos or whatever the case is, pride, we don't address it sometimes. And if you know anything about me, I think one of the main reasons that I started this podcast was to talk about what's not talked about enough. What I noticed in the entrepreneur community, whether it was networking events or whatever the case is, everybody's saying, oh, things are great. I'm fine, right? We talked about that last week. It's that I'm fine. The smoke and mirrors that we put up, right? Whether it's around your business, or your own mental health, we're always putting up that smoke and mirrors to make everyone believe that we're okay. And I'm not saying that we just have to spill everything out onto everyone. And, someone just says, in some small talk, how you doing? And you just unleash on them. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that when you're talking to people that are part of your circle or people that you trust, people that are like-minded people, I think it's okay that we open up and we talk about these things because we can overcome them together. And I think it's important that that's talked about more. Last week, I talked about the CMHA's campaign that they ran. And for the first week of May, their campaign was called the Get Real campaign. And hopefully you listened to my last podcast where I got real and I talked about what was going on, my real concerns, my real worries, right? And hopefully you saw that and maybe you opened up to someone and maybe you feel better about it. I think opening up helps you feel better. I mean, this is my way of helping myself feel better is talking to you. So hopefully you did the same. And going back to that I'm fine stuff, I mean, cut the shit. It's okay to not be fine, right? We've cut out outside interaction with pretty much anyone. Okay. We're only interacting with people in our own households, people that we're quarantined with. We've pretty much cut off that human connection outside of that circle. Our businesses are closed. We're in an uncertain time. There was 2 million job losses. It's wild, right? Wild to think that we're coming out of this uncertainty into more uncertainty in a recession, right? It's okay to not be fine. I think if you're okay and you're claiming you're okay, there's something wrong there. So it's what I say is address, Don't suppress, because I've really suppressed what's going on inside me for way too long. All right. So some backstory on me in a real honest way is I find it really hard to open up to people. Funny enough, right? I'm on this podcast. It's something that I've been working at. It's something that I've been chiseling away at for some time now. And I think that, part of my journey and part of my healing with mental health is that I found it really helps to get some of this stuff off of my chest with the right people, right? So once I quit my job, this is my backstory, quit my job years ago, took this business, Always Bearded, full time, right? Then I had a family, right? Not only do I not have income coming in, that's security, job security. Now I've got a family to support, and things got real and things got heavy, real fast. And I kept pushing everything down and burying it down and just trudging away at things, right? And what happens is you fill up, and then there's nowhere for it to go. And then eventually you can't take it anymore and you crack, right? And that's what happened to me. I started having, out of the blue, these panic attacks. I would wake up in my sleep sweating and couldn't breathe, and my heart was racing, and I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I would also have these panic attacks where it felt like the room was closing in, and my ears started ringing, and everything was like I was outside of myself, right? It was almost like an out of body experience, and it was super, super scary. I went to my doctor, and he told me that these are anxiety related panic attacks from anxiety. And if I didn't do anything to take care of myself, self-care wise, and address what was happening with the stress that was in my life, then it was only going to get worse and probably, debilitating to me. Okay. So, I knew that I had to get self-aware, and self-awareness is something that we're going to talk about in this call with Hayley Peek. Super important for us as a business owner to be self-aware of what's happening to us, self-aware of our goals, self-aware of our worries, self-aware of our concerns, self-aware of everything. But I struggled with it. I mean, there's a line of being self-aware and being overwhelmed, right? Us as an employee or as an entrepreneur, we take on so much, right? And it's often that we get overwhelmed and we shut down, we burn out, or, it's too much to take. But the way that I look at it, and the way that I looked at it in my healing, was that if we can look at goals, big goals, right? We want to be in all these stores across Canada, or we want to do a certain amount of revenues. We have to look at it as incremental goals, little smaller baby steps that we take to get to that larger goal, right? If we don't, it just seems so far away. And I think the same thing is we have to look at our worries and our concerns, is that they might be monumental and big, but if we take apart that and digest it in smaller chunks, it's way easier to just hack away at it and not feel so overwhelmed. So that's just a little tidbit that I thought was super important in how I addressed everything. Okay. And lastly, before we get into this call, being self-aware is super important as well with how we pass judgment, right? If we're not aware of what we are portraying when people come to us, or when we see mental health happen around us, if we're not being self-aware of how we pass judgment, or how we're supporting others, how we're reacting, or how our emotional responses are, then that can be detrimental to the people that might be suffering around us. So that maybe that's our employees, maybe that's our friends, maybe that's our partners, maybe that's our children. There's a ton of stuff happening right now that we have to be super aware of. And I think compassion is something that we have to look at. A crazy statistic that came out that said half of Canadians feel that their mental health is getting worse during these times. Okay. And 44% of Canadians are saying that they're feeling worried during this pandemic, and 41% are feeling anxious. Okay. So that means, guys, there's essentially a 50% chance that the person that is on the other side of this conversation that we're talking to anywhere at any point in time is suffering from some sort of mental illness right now. So we have to be super compassionate. Caremongering is something that I talked about last time, just being caring to people, seeing how you can help in any way possible, is going to really pay it forward. And I think that's what we need to do. Okay, let's get into this call. We're going to talk about this. Super excited for this, guys. Take this all in, and I hope that you exercise this in your own business. Okay. Well, welcome to the podcast, Hayley. I really appreciate you taking the time. A little bit of backstory about us. We kind of connected on LinkedIn, and I found a lot of what you were doing, very relevant and of particular interest to me as an entrepreneur. So I really appreciate you being here with me to discuss, a bunch of stuff, really, mental health and the likes.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for having me. I think it's awesome that you're bringing this conversation to your platform, so I'm grateful.
yeah, no problem. So, before I get into this too much, I like to, kind of flip it back to you and talk about how your experience, like what's your backstory? How did you stumble into this as an entrepreneur and want to help others and make it your business?
Yeah, so if I'm being fully transparent, I got into this work because I live with and lived through my own struggle with mental illness and mental health challenges. So that for me came on 2017. So I guess four years ago-ish now. I came face to face with my own struggles. At the time, had no idea what was happening, like many of us who struggle in some capacity, and really had to fight through that. I was working full time as a consultant in a completely different industry. But going through that experience and disclosing in the workplace and looking for support in the workplace is what led me into this work. So long story short is in a span of a year, I got sick and lost one job to lack of support in the workplace. And then when I was got well, focused on my recovery, and I sought employment somewhere else. And then a few months in, got sick again. So I was facing that same issue of having to disclose again in a new workplace that I needed support and accommodation. And in both situations, I was really lucky. I had managers that were incredibly supportive and understanding, thankfully, but the support really did lack beyond that from a organization culture perspective. It wasn't there. And as a result, I lost work from it. And that sent me into a whole nother illness of facing depression and having to navigate that and figure that out. So as I was going through my own journey of healing and recovery with anxiety and depression, as a couple of those pieces, I came to the realization that this is the work and conversation I wanted to be in, because I wanted to make change so that other people who are struggling at work didn't have to go through what I went through. I wanted to educate individuals on how to hold space for this conversation. I wanted to educate HR professionals and ability specialists and all the people in those roles how to support someone in struggle, because I really felt there was a lot lacking when I was going through it. And I think that's just the nature of our education and, what we have access to. So I started by doing community peer support, just one-on-one with people in my community, and having open dialogues about this and trying to meet them and support them where they were at. And that it grew pretty organically from that into networking and presenting at conferences and really putting myself out there in ways I would have never dreamed I would have before. But yeah, that's kind of how it all came to be. And it's just grown from there.
Yeah, I think that like you said, the lack of support is was very evident. And my background, I'm coming from sales and marketing, very high paced arena, where it's it's just one timeline to the next, and it's just get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done, get the deal, make the sale. And there really isn't turns in a lot of allowance for the struggles that we go through. And I don't think a lot of people even realize they're there until it's too late. So I think that it is so important as an entrepreneur. I talked about in my last podcast about optimism and working in the foundation in ourself of being optimistic and confident.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. And I think that, the struggle with entrepreneurs is most of the entrepreneurs don't know how to support themselves, let alone employees. Right. So I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, we didn't think that we were going to be entrepreneurs. I mean, some of us did, but most of us didn't. And I think from that standpoint, we're kind of making it up as we go. And so I think that a lot of the from a managerial standpoint is that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, we don't know how to control it, and then it's radiated down into our employees, and then we have this toxic culture. And that's not good for anything. It's not good for our personal health. It's not good for our employees' personal health, and it's definitely not good for brand image, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. And it's funny that you say that, because I never expected myself to be an entrepreneur. I still think it's strange when I say that out loud, because I don't come from a business background at
Right.
all. My brother's always been the entrepreneurial one of the family, and I see the way we're both so different. So it's funny when I think about it. But yeah, I think you nailed it right on. It's hard for us to even think about supporting employees when we don't even know how to support ourselves.
Right.
It's a huge dilemma for a lot of people right now.
Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of this, while Doug Ford and the premier are telling everybody to get things ready, get processes ready, get everything ready in their business. I think it's very important that we work something like this into our health and safety plans, into our standard operating procedures, that this is very, very important with ourselves and for our employees as well, that support is there.
For sure. And I think now we have this opportunity, hopefully, as entrepreneurs or business owners or whatever, to be proactive with it and
Mm-hmm.
not wait until, the aftermath of all of this. I know a lot of the news is saying the second wave of the pandemic is going to be mental health, but I look
Mm-hmm.
at that and I almost find it comical, because this mental health has already been an issue in our country prior to this
Right.
COVID-19. It's just
put a fire under it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just being put under a spotlight right now. So we really need to not ignore it anymore. And that takes planning and prioritizing and putting it top of mind.
Very much so. So I went through some of your blogs and stuff like that, and I'm gonna quote you here. But one of the things that the CMHA was saying that I mentioned in my last podcast was that not having strong connections can be the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So the headline behind that is it's terrible for your health. So with COVID-19 and the social and the physical distancing, one of your articles, you had said that human connection is one of the strongest and most powerful tools in healing and recovery of mental health. How would you say that's been impacted now with everything that we're doing? I mean, we're on a Zoom call. I would much prefer to do this in person. I'm sure that, just with the connections that are out there, being in front of a computer is it's really tough.
Yeah.
How would you say that that's impacting, or we can have workarounds in any way to keep strong human connection?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can speak from my personal experience. I know when this all started happening and that isolation became very real, and having to embrace that, I mean, it's kind of twofold. So one is, for me, I took my biggest struggle, I'm going to call it, in life, the biggest challenge I faced, which was my illnesses, and turned it into a career, which is almost a double-edged sword sometimes, because I'm constantly talking about it, but it's also very healing. But the second part is when this pandemic all unfolded, In full transparency, I was not well for the first few weeks of it
I don't think
because
anybody was.
yeah, and that's the thing, whether you live with illness or mental health challenge or not, none of us were prepared for this because we're all social creatures. But I know for me, it was really tough. And I've spoken to other colleagues in the field about this who live with their own experience as well, just so I didn't feel alone in it. But I've spent so long training my brain and training myself to recognize isolation as a red flag for my depression
Right.
because it's what I do. So when I'm ill, I know I start to isolate and I know that that's the downward spiral for me. So when this all unfolded, it was really tough for a couple of weeks for me to wrap my head around that and learn how to basically rewire what I had learned as healthy. I
Hmm.
struggled quite a bit through, I'd say mid-March, like to April, just getting a handle on that. And part of being able to get a handle on it was learning for me to sit with the feelings of discomfort, sit with the overwhelming feelings, the anxiety that creeped in, and pull in my supports that I have in place. Cause we've all got a toolbox of things we pull on for our own wellness and
Hmm.
double down on them, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Uh, and say, okay, this is against the grain for me. I need to pull in everything I've got and work through it. So embracing those feelings, it ultimately is kind of what we have to do. And then talking about it and talking through it with others to feel that connection because so many of us were feeling it and still are.
Yep.
So it's like driving connection from disconnection, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, so, I mean, when the supporting through struggle program that you're running, um, from my understanding, is that this is primarily built to create those foundations of support in the workplace, right? And from what I've seen through my research, is that it's been aligned with the national standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace. Um, so tell me more about this program. I mean, you've designed this with a partner of yours, Kim, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Kim Sunderland and myself co-collaborated on it.
so tell me how long this has been around. What are you doing with this program? You know, things like that.
Yeah, so this program, it's a one-day workshop that's been done in workplaces for senior management and for staff. We're also expanding it into communities, so it can become a workshop you can access just as a general audience standpoint. Um, so it came to be about 2 years ago now. I met Kim along the way as I started to grow in this industry and in my own business. And Kim's been in the industry longer than I am, and she specializes in peer support as well. So we were actually out east. I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to co-facilitate alongside of her out east, doing peer support training around Nova Scotia. So we traveled a lot together. And I remember in our first training together, the peer support training, which is a specialized skill, there was so much in there that I felt could be pulled out and brought to a general audience. And it was all around these pieces of communication and how to have these tough conversations, how to build our empathetic skills, our active listening, all that stuff. So I kind of pitched it to her 2 years ago on a plane and interrupted her movie, and she was on board to create it with me, which was amazing. And the biggest piece of creating this workshop was that I wanted it to be created from a place of lived experience with mental health and mental health challenge. So it's very much a passion project. It's very much like a piece of my heart, and I know a piece of hers as well, because we're both very upfront about our own struggles in with mental illness and mental health challenge, and we use that throughout the workshop to teach the different elements of it. So it's really cool. Like we cover things such as self-awareness, how to build your self-awareness practice. What does that even mean? How to start to notice your emotions, your judgments, what to do with them. So it's a bit of a CBT kind of technique.
Hmm.
We talk about meeting someone where they're at. So because our human nature is always to fix problems for others, especially in the workplace, if you're a leader in a leadership position, your desire is to fix, right? And that can actually be more detrimental than helpful when someone's struggling with mental health.
Because it's somebody telling you what to do.
Exactly. And when you're in struggle with a mental health challenge, especially if anxiety is at play, feeling out of control of your own choices and being told what to do just adds to that. We want to be empowered and know that we are still in control of our choices. That's huge. So we talk about how to practice those communication skills, how to build them, how to foster them, and what do they even mean. We go into talking about fears and boundaries. What are the fears that hold us back from having these talks with people in our lives, whether it's personal or professional? Because a lot of the work I was noticing as I grew in this industry was people were just downright afraid because they didn't know how to talk about it. They, they don't know how to bring it up with their loved one about a potential addiction. They don't know how to bring up if they think someone's depressed and potentially suicidal. Like they just don't know. Because where do we really get that training? We
Yeah.
don't. So that was a huge piece for me where it was building in part of the content to talk about what are the fears, like what is holding you back from even having this talk, and getting people to identify it and even writing it down so that once you hit it on the head and identify it, you can work with it. Well, you
That's
can
self-awareness, right?
exactly
Yeah.
like the self-awareness is linked throughout the entire day of the workshop because I truly believe we can't help someone in an honest way if we don't have some type of self-awareness practice
Yeah.
in the compassionate sense, because you have to know how to regulate your own emotions and know what your triggers are and all that stuff. So it's a pretty full workshop to say the least, but
Yeah.
it's been an amazing experience. Over 2019 we traveled coast to coast from literally from BC to Newfoundland doing this workshop with different groups of people, and it was amazing to see what would come out of the conversations in the room because it is a very interactive workshop.
Yeah.
So it's growing really quickly. And then when this pandemic hit, now we're being faced with how do we get it online?
Right.
Because it's an in-person workshop, but it's still very needed. So we're in the process of that right now, is getting it online, logistically speaking, and making sure that it doesn't lose those core key elements of storytelling and sharing and being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Those are the pieces that bring this workshop to life because so much gets shared in the room.
Well, one
Um,
of the things, I mean, about Zoom that you might be able to work into it is, I mean, Zoom provides ability to do breakout sessions and stuff like that too, right? So same thing for me, because I'm a marketing teacher. I've found it's really hard because I teach internal marketing. A lot of these students are new to college. Is that, developing that relationship is a lot different for people that are new to college out of high school. How do I do that online, right? And I found that I've had a lot of success with breakout sessions, um, you know, digital breakout sessions, because you can have that collaboration and then still kind of drop into it and help people out in small groups.
Yeah, for sure. And even when I was starting my own business, I actually worked full time with Shopify as well. So that's all remote. Well, the role I was in was remote. So I'm used to how to create that connection online using Zoom and virtual breakout sessions and things like that. So I'm hoping to pull on that for this workshop and, bring the two together because it is possible. It's just a
Yeah,
change, right? It's
it's a huge change.
uncomfortable, it's unwanted, but you got to do it. So
It's the new normal.
it's the new normal. And again, like the conversation is bigger now more than ever. We had a ton of interest in 2019 and we still have got a ton of interest. So it's just having this conversation and making sure people have access to it, talking about boundaries and, the big one being too, how to talk about suicide with people, how to hold space for that conversation, which is a big one.
Hmm.
But it's all about learning how to build connection and trust with someone so that you are essentially creating a support line if and when they're ready to come to you. And
Yeah,
that's what it's about. We want to make sure that we can be a trusted individual for someone and let them know when you're ready, if and when you're ready, I am here. Like no judgment. I'm here for you and to support whatever you need.
that's great. It's so much needed. Um, I think one of the things for myself that I dealt with, and I think I've talked about this before with you in our first call, is that self-awareness was one of the biggest things for me, um, because I just everything crept up. I think, becoming an entrepreneur, the moment that I became an entrepreneur and I made that jump, that full-time jump, quit my job, took this on, had children, started a family, those pressures, they just build up and build up. And if you're not self-aware of all those things, you're just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
on to the next, you're just bearing it down. That eventually it just creeps up and it just all comes spilling out. Right. And that's what happened to me. I had these uncontrollable panic attacks in the middle of my sleep that started where I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was dying. And I would wake up and I can't breathe and then I just kind of calm my heart down but I couldn't control it. And so I found that a big part of um, my recovery and was self-awareness, was just becoming aware of my own fears and challenges, and then breaking that down into digestible chunks. So I guess my question to you is, as an entrepreneur, what could you say is like the go-to tip for being self-aware but not being overwhelmed, because there's so much happening.
Yeah, and I think it's so tough because as entrepreneurs, we're in a really different boat because most of us predominantly probably work in isolation before this and now, and it's all feeling like a
Yeah,
lot. It's There's no easy answer. It's hard. I think you have to be willing to prioritize your own wellness and build it into your routine, which can be tough when you're also trying to build a business. But if you think about it from the perspective of, if you don't build it in and do it alongside building a business, you're going to hit burnout and then
yeah,
everything suffers. You suffer, your business suffers. If you have employees, they suffer. So you have to be really conscious about that and be mindful. And it's tough to do because when you're an entrepreneur, you just want to go, go, go. And, we're all working crazy hours and it's your heart and soul in the project. Likely, you probably fell into entrepreneurship because you're passionate about something.
yeah,
And it can be really easy, as I'm sure you know, to get wrapped up in that. And then burnout all of a sudden shows up out of nowhere.
yeah. It's a wall.
It's a wall and it comes on so quickly. So it's interesting because I know for me, I when I was moving into entrepreneurship, I already had a lot of those coping skills in place because I hit burnout previously when I was employed and tried to push through for 6 months on 2 hours of sleep a night just from constant panic attacks. And hearing you say that what you experienced, I feel with you because it's a horrible feeling. And if you haven't been through it, it's hard to put it into words.
Yeah,
That was me for 4 to 6 months before I finally took the time off and was so ill to the point of almost being in hospital. But it took that breaking point for me to realize, okay, I need to do something.
yeah,
So when I moved into my own business, it was already top of mind for me to remember that I need to ensure that I'm in a good space if I'm going to do this. Because I did worry turning my struggle into my career. I didn't know if that'd be too much. And there was definitely elements on sometimes or times I can remember thinking it's too much to talk about mental health all the time for me because I'm still triggered or
yeah.
feeling like I'm taking on too much from other people. Um,
Well, that's the thing about our passions, is that we're so passionate about it that we just take on whatever we can and think, well, as an entrepreneur, I'm just going to make it up. I'm just going to figure it out.
yeah, that comes
And
back to haunt you.
it sure does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's really cool that as an entrepreneur, if we can shift our perspective from that, instead of operating from survival mode and building business from survival mode, we need to build it from sustainability mode. And sometimes that means saying no to things and
Yeah.
putting a boundary around how much we can put on our plate, because it's so tempting to take on any and every project that comes your way when you're growing.
Yeah.
But that can have a poor impact, right? On quality, on your health, on whole bunch of stuff. I also think it's cool when you role model that to potential clients or employees and
Yeah.
put up boundaries around that and say, you know what, I would really love to take this on. I just can't right now. Maybe we can find time to do it later on, and just open dialogue around it. And I think that people are now more understanding around that kind of boundary setting in business, hopefully, is my impression.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I think the best we can do as entrepreneurs is remember that we are in control of what our day looks like.
Yeah.
No matter how chaotic it can feel, we can choose to put in a line in your email signature that says, give 2 days for me to respond, or I don't check email after 6 p.m. Whatever your boundary needs to be to set that expectation
Mhm.
instead of meeting the expectations of others. And I learned that the hard way, because when I was consulting in a previous life, I would be on emails all the time, 10 p.m. at night. Whereas now I'm really, really conscious about not responding outside of certain hours, because once you do that, you set expectations. So,
Right. I think also, with quarantine, that's its own issue in itself, is that um, everybody feels that they have to be available all the time. because you're at home, there's no balance, and you feel like people are calling you up, and it's like, well, where else am I going to be? So people feel that they have to be available all the time. There's no balance. I think that's a huge problem.
And that's, again, that word balance is so key. I mean, even even yesterday, I did a webinar. It was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was so wiped yesterday for some reason. I don't know. I still have my ups and downs, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, I actually had to schedule in time for a nap before the webinar because I was just so burnt out, and I'm so happy I did because that's what I needed. So that was part of my workday, was 1 hour nap.
Self-aware. That's your self-awareness and self-care.
And
Yeah.
if I went into it, I had so much fog in my brain. I'm like, this is not going to be as quality if I don't carve out an hour, crash for an hour, and just let it be. That's the first time I've done that as part of my workday, but it was awesome. It paid off.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's little things like that, right? Like, you got to learn about yourself. And like you said, the self-awareness piece, you learn as you go. And the other piece is just being really kind to ourselves. We're our worst critics. We feel like we need to take on everything and just push as far as we can. But it's been proven time and time again that doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work. It doesn't feel good either to run a business that way, for yourself.
Yeah. So if there's little things that we can start with, I think that a lot of people look at self-care as like, meditation and, massages and, all this stuff. But is there a starting point that like you can say, maybe it's just take a minute to breathe, close your eyes and breathe every so often, take a walk. What would you say for an entrepreneur is like a starting point for self-care? So a lot of entrepreneurs don't have this built into their systems.
Yeah, good point. I think if I go back to basics on it, I would say start to pay attention to where your stress is coming from and break self-care down into, to quote you from earlier, digestible pieces, right? It doesn't need to be an hour of meditation. Maybe it's 5 minutes of breathing and that's meditative. Maybe it's step away from your laptop and just go stand outside and look 20 feet away just to help your eyesight adjust. That's a big one. I know for me, I try and do that because being in front of a screen, and which we're all doing right now, is really draining, not only on your body, but your brain.
There's a lot of articles I read about just how draining Zoom can be.
Incredibly draining.
Yeah.
So now that we're on it all day long, we've got to schedule in that, stand up every 20 minutes, drinking more water. Just try and break it into smaller pieces and smaller chunks that you can digest. And that will grow over time. I think the other thing to be aware of for entrepreneurs right now, and it's come up a lot in the last couple of weeks, this question of, how do I know when my stress is so high that I should be reaching out for support? So people are kind of trying to figure out,
what's their breaking point?
Yeah, I guess so. What's my breaking point? Like, how do I know if I'm burning out is, I think, another way to phrase that. And it's a good question because you'll know, but you and I have a better read on that for ourselves
because we've experienced it.
But there's so many people right now that are experiencing anxiety for the first time.
Yeah.
And I have to bring myself back to that moment in my life when I first experienced it and think, oh yeah, it's a horrible first time experience because you just can't process what's happening.
No.
So it's really important to pay attention to, if you're kind of in your head right now thinking, I don't know if I'm reaching my point of burnout, pay attention to how your stress or anxieties are impacting your day-to-day routines. Is your sleep impacted? Is your eating impacted? Are you, these little things throughout the day, if your routines are changing for the worse, it's a good sign that you need to make a change and pull in some support, whether that's counseling or clinical support, whether it's peer support, whether it's a friend, whether it's yoga class online, I don't care. Like, pull in all your different tools, because it's not going to be one solution does the job. For me, I have a whole toolbox of healthcare practitioners and meditation and yoga and eating well. All of these are all elements of my own self-care. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. I mean, the same thing with me. I don't have a whole slew of medical professionals I can reach out to at any given time, but I've got, I've been doing a lot of the Peloton stuff. They've got their own meditation stuff. I've got the Calm app on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, I do a lot of that stuff when I can find time, but I'm still, you know, I could be so much better. I'm, you know, because we're so busy, right? But I mean, if I can say anything to leave this conversation off is that, you know, in my last podcast, I talked about, you know, the hashtag get real and, you know, stop saying I'm fine. I think that's the biggest thing in self-awareness too, is just breaking it down that it's like, it's okay to not be fine. I don't think anybody is fine right now. So, you know, when we hear that, it's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, stop lying to yourself. You know, it's time that we be more self-aware and talk about it, because that's going to lead to better connection. Right.
Yeah, and being honest and authentic. I used to have a joke that I would say to friends when I was really unwell, and people would ask, "How are you?" And you respond with the typical, "I'm good, you?" Like, just don't even think about it. And I said one day, I'm like, I wonder if I responded with the truth, how
Right.
someone would react. I never did it, but I always wondered, if I say, "I'm falling apart, actually, how are you?"
Yeah.
What would their reaction to that be? But yeah, I think it's cool to see. I mean, it's not cool to see people all kind of in the same boat, but it is cool to see people starting to open up and realize they're not alone in those feelings of anxieties and stress.
Hmm.
And you know, people like you and I sharing tips and tricks on how to cope with that as people who have lived through it. That's, in my opinion, really powerful. And I think it's great when that's if that's the best I can give right now to someone, I am happy to do that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take too much more of your time. I know you're super busy. Um, and I appreciate you very much coming out on this Zoom call. I'm going to implore everybody to, you know, check out HayleyPeek.com and the Supporting Through Struggle program. You know, and integrating some of this foundation into your business when we set up our own processes, because the time is now. You know, like you said, it's best to be proactive right now, and start fixing it before everything piles on, because it's going to pile on quickly when the economy reopens, right?
Yeah, and we all just need to be kind to ourselves and don't beat yourself up if you're feeling these things, because you're not alone in that. And it's perfectly normal to be
Hmm.
overwhelmed and in fear of uncertainty and whatnot right now. So we just need to keep having the conversations and offer support where we can.
Hmm.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much for having me on and having this conversation. I know it's Mental Health Week, so it's a big promotion for it. But yeah, I hope it's one that lives on past this week and people start to reach out.
Me too. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, Haley. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All
Take care.
right. Take care. Before I leave you for the day, I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of our frontline healthcare workers and essential workers out there for all that you do. Thank you so much. To my fellow entrepreneurs, thank you for listening. Keep powering through. Stay positive, stay optimistic, and stay hungry. Thank you for subscribing below to our channel, listening to us on Apple Music, on Google Play, on Spotify, and we'll see you next week.